This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, your solution when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Use the code MacVoices to take $20 off your first purchase at linode.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this time we're going to focus on something new and something that I'm still learning about, but I'm pretty enthusiastic about because I find it more and more useful, and I find myself using it for more and more projects, and that's mind mapping. But mind mapping is something that takes a little while to learn and figure out how to use and how to use for what you do. And that's why I'm happy to have Mike Schmitz here to talk about his new mind mapping course that will teach you how to mind map. Mike, welcome. It's good to see you.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
I am delighted. When you told me about this course, I was delighted. It's like, okay, here's a guy that uses it and has taught courses on it already, and now you're going to create something for the suite setup that all of us can learn from.
Yes, and I should interject here real quickly that it is not just my course. It might be my face and my voice in the videos that you'll you'll see if you decide to purchase it. But it's definitely a team effort putting it together. And that's one of the things I like about working with the folks at the Suite Setup, Sean Blanc, Isaac Smith, and everybody else, is that I don't have to do it all myself. It's kind of nice to have a team to fall back on when it comes to putting it all together. So,
right, and thank you for clarifying that. But like you say, when it's your face and your voice, that's what people associate with as
sure.
your course. So, so I think maybe I covered why mind mapping as far as, why you would want to take this course, because it's something that, while I find very useful, it took me a little while to wrap my head around it and figure out why I would want to do this over, a pen and pencil approach or maybe even an outline approach.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the mind mapping tools that are available now is that you don't necessarily have to choose one or the other. The app that I like to use is Linode, and that actually has an outline view built into it. So you can build your mind map, and then you can still get the standard outline view, and you can export it to OPML and use that in a lot of different places, like an outlining application like Omni Outliner, for example. And I'm a big advocate of using the right tool for the job. So there are cases where I will use pen and paper or analog tools for mind mapping. You can see behind me, I've got a whiteboard in my office where many of my map has started out there. But for the most part, I do use the digital tools primarily. And there's a lot of good ones, honestly. We kind of have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to mind mapping applications that are available for Apple users specifically on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. But the one that I like is Linode, specifically because I think the design is really nice. And my experience, the value of mind mapping is not the application itself, but the quality of the ideas that get put in there. And if you've got a well-designed app, it changes your state when you open it. It brings you joy, and happy people are productive people. The better mind state you have when you're going into a mind mapping session, the more and the better quality ideas you're going to get as a result.
Okay, that's going to take us off track, but I can't help but go down that path for a second. So, what is the mental state or mindset that you want to approach mind mapping with that will allow you to get the most out of that technique?
Sure. Well, really, you have to decide for yourself why you're sitting down to mind map in the first place. You can use mind maps a lot of different ways. I've used them for problem solving. So if there's a problem that I'm really just stuck on, I may put it in the middle of my mind map and just start capturing everything related to that thing as all of these different child nodes. And after you got everything on there, you kind of zoom back out and you kind of see the connections. And then at that point, maybe you see the solution. Maybe you're trying to create a piece of content. I use mind mapping a lot when I'm writing, especially the longer articles for the Suite Setup. Like there was one we just published on our Fantastic L3 review that started off as a mind map, and you've got all the different sections, and it's like 6,000 words. So I have discovered that if I spend some time mind mapping and connecting all the pieces that way, it does something in my brain where it feels like it has the confidence now to move forward. And I don't have any sort of statistics to back this up, but I I believe that for each hour I spend mind mapping an article before I sit down to write it, it saves me about 2 hours in the writing process because I don't hit those walls and like, I don't know what to do next. Or even worse, sometimes, I'll start writing an article because I think there's an idea there. And then I get to the end of it and it's like, well, that didn't really go where I thought it was going to go. And I have nothing else to say on this. So I guess, I just have to chuck this one in and start over. When you've got a deadline staring you in the face and you got to publish something, that's not a great scenario to be in. So really the first thing you got to, going back to your original question, first thing you got to decide when you sit down is why am I going to be mind mapping? That kind of determines the process. But I 100% believe that the better state you are in when you sit down to do that, the more your brain is able to come up with those ideas because you're not focusing on a problem that is causing you pain. You're not focused on the negative emotion, and your brain is able to do what it does best, embrace that radiant thinking process and connect all those dots in new and interesting ways.
So after the first part, I think I heard echoes of GTD, of the idea of getting it out of your head and into, in this case, the mind map format.
Yes, sort of. I have issues with GTD a little bit because I feel like it's a very prescriptive system. Like you go here, you go here, you go here. And then it ends up in a specific place. With mind mapping, you really don't know where it's going to go. But there is a process that your brain goes through and it kind of sorts all this stuff out. And then after it does that, you kind of see the path forward. So GTD, I feel, is very, this thing belongs either here or here. Mind mapping is maybe it belongs in both. Maybe it belongs someplace else. Like you really don't know until you get it all out there. And then once you have all the dots out there, then you can start to make the connections in new and interesting ways. It's especially effective for creating, I've found. One of the books that really impacted me was Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And I went through this thing not too long ago where I had trouble viewing myself as being creative. I think maybe I told this story at MacStock, but just real briefly, I have played guitar for a while. I like writing songs, but I would write a song and then I would hear the chord progression that I stole from some other song or a melody line in something on the radio. And I'm like, man, I can't come up with anything original. And Austin Kleon basically gave me permission to be creative because he said that when you create something, you're really just connecting dots in ways that they haven't been connected before. But the dots themselves, those are the results of the inputs that you've collected. So you collect more dots and then your brain connects them in new ways. And it's almost like at that point, creativity is sort of like a formula. The more dots that you collect, you have more to choose from, but then the way that your brain connects them, that's just the way that your brain does it. And then the result is not something that you have to have a value judgment about. That's the other thing about mind mapping is you could have a 1-2 hour mind mapping session, have all these dots, and you don't have a solid, this is what I need to do next with this yet. And that's completely okay. There's still value in the process. It's not like you just check the box and go, okay, that's done, which is typically what most people think of when they think of GTD and task management. Okay, done with that. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and the part about GTD I was referring to was just sort of what you just elaborated on. The idea of getting it out sort of where you can see it, so you don't have to remember things, that you don't lose them in your memory. They are there. And in the case of the mind mapping, you get them into the mind map and then start connecting, arranging, extrapolating on, that kind of thing.
Developing them, right? That's the thing that has really made the difference for me. And I wrote about this in a series of posts leading up to this course launch about, I call it my idea development system. And the first part of it is simple, and everybody who follows GTD probably follows some form of this, where you capture something. For me, that's drafts. I get an idea, capture it in drafts. Eventually, it goes into OmniFocus, my task manager. And I've got a tag in OmniFocus for ideas. So at any point, I've got all of these ideas that I can choose from when I need to write something. I never have a blank slate. I never am struggling with something to come up with something, but I don't know which of those ideas are going to be any good yet. So I'll go to that ideas tag and I'll pick one of those, and then I will spend some time mind mapping it. And that's kind of like an additional filter level where I can see this thing for what it really is. And that's the part that I think a lot of people miss, and myself too. I have to fight the I have to fight the inclination to just take that idea and just sit down and start writing it. Because like I said, sometimes I do that and then I decide that I see later on, there really wasn't that much there. And now I've wasted a bunch of time and I still have something that I have to write by Monday.
Yeah, and I know I've kind of done the same thing where you think, okay, I'll just start to write, and then you finish it, and in some cases you publish it, and you realize, darn, I forgot that, I forgot this, I forgot that, I meant to say this, and you can revise it, but most of the time you don't. You just say, fine, it's out there, move on to the next thing, and you really have lost something that could have made that piece or project or whatever just that much better.
Exactly. So GTD is great for making sure that none of your ideas fall through the cracks. But GTD is not great at showing you what is really in those ideas that you've captured. Is this a blog post? Is there enough here for a course? I mean, that's kind of how the mind mapping course came to be. Was I was going to write an article about how I use mind mapping for taking notes on books that I read. And then digging into it, I'm like, wow, there's like 15 other ways that you could use mind maps. These would all be cool workflows. And then obviously you've got all the features in MindNode. And then you get into like the principles and the ideas behind mind mapping and what that's trying to solve. So it ended up being this pretty big video course with a couple different sections. We've got the workflows, like I mentioned, the screencast videos on how to use MindNode, but there's another section which is more informational teaching type videos that speak to the specific pain points of why people would want to use mind mapping in the first place, which was honestly the most fun for me to make. So it's like, what are the different buckets you've got to have? I talked a little bit about my idea development system, talk about why mind mapping works, and a lot of that stuff came from just talking to our customers and figuring out what are their biggest pain points with MindNode. We actually had a survey that almost 800 people responded to and went through all that data and figured out, okay, so this is really what folks are struggling with, and then try to create solutions from there, do all the research, spend a ton of time connecting all the dots so that people can hopefully, go through the videos and we can save you a lot of time. We can show you kind of the pieces and the tools that are at your disposal. And then the cool thing about mind mapping, honestly, is that you can use those any way that you want and kind of build your own system based on how you work.
This MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, your solution for when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Need a virtual cloud server like now? Linode has you covered. You can deploy a new server customized to your purpose with the features you want in seconds. Time is money, and if you have that immediate need, Linode is there. And even if you don't need your new server that quickly, Linode is there. And these aren't just any servers. These are SSD-based 40 gigabit network, high-performance processor-powered servers that are capable of web hosting, distributed applications, hosted servers, and more. Pick from a simple $5 per month Nanode plan, or ramp the whole way up to a high-powered dedicated CPU. When you need to upgrade as your requirements demand, that upgrade is a click away. To make some deployments even easier, there's a host of one-click installs available, from Minecraft to WordPress. Need to locate your server in a particular location for either performance or legal reasons? No problem. Linode has servers all over the world. Perhaps most important, though, is their pricing. No surprises, no hidden costs. You pay for what you need, and you pay for what you use on an hourly basis. No data transfer fees like some of the larger cloud services. It's your data. Why would you expect to pay to access it? With Linode, you don't. These are just a few of the features that Linode brings to the table. I want you to visit linode.com/MacVoices right now and see what all the fuss is about. Again, linode.com/MacVoices takes $20 off your first server package. You've been thinking about that virtual server of your own for a long time. Make it happen today with Linode. Thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices. Now, from what you've said, it sounds like this is going to almost be a combination course of mind mapping as a concept and a process, as well as how to use MindNode. Because you also said that we have an embarrassment of riches here from the Mac, iPad, and iPhone standpoint in the software itself. So is that a fair way to describe this course?
Yeah, so there's a third of the course is screencast tutorial videos, which is very much in line with all of the other courses that we have at the Suite setup. We have a course on Ulysses, we've got a course on GoodNotes, and it's basically for someone who was to read one of our articles on the best mind mapping app, the best pro writing app, the best analog note taking app, and they want to know how they can take full advantage of this application that we recommend. So that is a part of it, but this is kind of unique in that there are two other sections which are not MindNode specific. The workflow videos, we do use MindNode to show how those are put together, but it's really showing how you might use a mind map for something like taking notes at a meeting where you're documenting the decisions that are being made and you're adding those as notes to a node, and you're documenting action items for people who are going to follow up with things that they said they were going to do in the meeting, to project management. I've got one from a friend of mine who uses mind mapping to create this life map. So every couple of months, he sits down and he answers for these 10 different areas of his life, like relationships, adventure, and you can kind of define your own categories, but he gives himself an arbitrary score of 0 to 10. And inside each one of those nodes, he's got a whole bunch of questions that he uses to just kind of locate himself. Like, have I done this, that, and the other thing? And that kind of provides the intention then for the goals that he's going to be setting for the next couple of months. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can use mind mapping, and you don't have to be using MindNode in order to get information and value from the course. But yeah, that's our favorite app. So that's the one that we showcase.
The way you're describing it, I like this a lot, because it sounds like you're going to give examples of how to use this in business, how to use it in personal productivity, how to use it even in personal development. So it's not going to be a case of, here's a parent, here's a child, here's another child, here's the way you hook the child.
Yep.
Child's great. Children together, that those very task-oriented things that you would be required to learn the application. But okay, then you're going to take it over here and say, this is how, these are some areas and some ways you might use it, and adapt it to your own.
Yeah, exactly. So just as an example, I mentioned the book notes thing because I read a book every couple of weeks, and I take notes on those books as I read them inside of MindNode in a mind map format. So I've got a physical book usually that I'm reading, and then I'll jot down ideas as they jump out to me or things that inspire me on MindNode on my phone. And there's a couple things that I've done with that I've kind of used to make my own, but I kind of walk through all that in the workflow video. For example, I've got different emoji that I use. Now MindNode provides tags, so you could use it that way too, but I created emoji so I could easily find like quotes that I wanted to remember along with the page numbers, or key ideas have like a key emoji, or inspirational points that really like impacted me. I've got a little light bulb icon. Action items I assign as tasks, so I can quickly see all of the tasks in my mind map document. So these are the action items I want to apply from reading the book. And I've got the cover of the book in the middle, and then I've got this huge diagram, which sometimes has pictures in it too. So if there's a diagram like GTD, for example, if I were reading that, taking notes on that book specifically in a mind map format, I would take a picture of that GTD decision tree and then put that right in the mind map instead of trying to describe that using words in a standard outline. And so the end result is that I've got these mind maps, these books that I've read that are sometimes hundreds of megabytes in size with all the pictures and things. But it's a summary of the book that I've read now. It's searchable, so I can Command F and find something if I wanted to do it later. And if I want to go back and review the information, I don't have to reread GTD. I'll go through the mind map that I created in about 5 minutes. I've got the gist of it.
I'm dying to go down that road, and I want to stay on the course. So we'll save that for another time. But so if memory serves, I think MindNode has iOS and Mac versions. And so is this course pretty much platform agnostic, at least for an Apple user?
Yeah, so everything in the screencast section will show how to do everything on both Mac and iOS. With MindNode version 7, there's feature parity between the two platforms. So there's a couple different visual things, but otherwise it's exactly the same. All the features are there, but we show you how to find them in all of the different platforms. And again, we're not necessarily trying to show you every single thing that you can do with the application. With MindNode, we do cover probably just about all of it. But for something like iThoughts, which is another great mind mapping application, for example, you can search your nodes using regular expressions. We're not going to cover that sort of stuff. That's very, very niche, nerdy, and that's great if you want to know how to do that sort of thing. But really, the value of the course is, how do I use mind mapping to capture and develop my ideas? So we'll show you how to use the tool to do that specifically. We've got a purpose in mind. It's not just here's every single cool technical feature that we could think of, but here's how you would use it practically.
Mike, I was having this conversation over the weekend about a couple different companies I know, and then with people that work there. And we're seeing this more and more, it seems. There's deployment of all these amazing tools, and I'm not going to call any particular tools out or any companies out for that matter. But the one thing that's missing in all these deployments is training. And it really intrigues me that a lot of money is being spent in purchasing these tools, setting them up on the servers, deploying them, and just here you are. And it's like, okay, now what do I do with it? And they're being grossly underutilized for that reason. And mix in the fact that at most companies, you have the younger people who are a lot more comfortable with keyboards and iPads and iPhones and all. And then you have the inevitable older folks who are not quite as comfortable, and they need the training more than anybody. And they're left completely hanging. Everybody's left completely hanging unless you take the initiative to go find a course like this yourself. And so I'm really delighted that you are doing this particular course for this particular set of tools, if you will.
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways that you could tackle that problem that you just described. You could say, well, we're going to do everything that we can to communicate to everybody who is going to have to use this thing that this is how you use it. But more importantly than how, I would argue, is why. What problem are you trying to solve with the knowledge that you're acquiring to use the tool? And that's kind of our approach with this course specifically. I mean, we try to take that approach with a lot of the other courses, but some of them do end up being, it's very straightforward. If you are using Ulysses, you are writing, and if you are writing for work, for example, you already know how and what you have to write. So we're not going to teach you this is how you write a book, but we'll show you specifically, like, here's how you could organize your sheets. And you could export it to EPUB. So if you had that goal of writing a book, this is kind of how Ulysses could help you accomplish that. But with mind mapping, it kind of, in my opinion, it's one of those things that a lot of people think they understand, but they don't really, because they don't do anything with it. And then once they start practicing it and they develop a habit of developing their ideas before they sit down to write them, to go back to that example, they see that there's a lot of fruit from that. And it's kind of magical because all you have to do is follow the process and let your brain go wherever it is. There's no right or wrong way to ideate or to brainstorm or to create a mind map around a problem that you're trying to solve. You just say, this is the thing, and then wherever your brain goes, it goes, and whatever is produced from it is completely okay. That's scary to some people because they think, like, by the end of that session, I've got to have this resolved. But sometimes you got to give it some space. You come back to it. I've done that before. This is everything I can think of for this course right now. But next week, when I've got my regular thinking time on my calendar, I'm going to revisit this and I'll get a fresh set of eyes on it. And all of a sudden I'll see, oh, hey, there's this workflow over here that we missed. And this would be really cool to do. And you have to kind of cook those ideas a little bit. And then it's always amazing to me what comes from that process.
Yeah, somewhere in that you mentioned that dirty word that none of us want to do, and that's practice.
Yep.
You can't, and that'll take me sort of the next question, because you probably, I wouldn't think, can't sit down in an afternoon, go through this course. And that's one of the questions, is how long will it take you to go through the course? But in an afternoon, you're going to become a mind mapping expert. You may have a much better idea of what it is and how to approach it. but you're still going to have to practice it. But that said, is it an afternoon course? Is it a weekend course? I mean, what kind of time commitment should folks expect to put into this?
Well, you could probably get through it in an entire day. There's a couple hours in the screencast for MindNode. There's a couple hours in the Mind Mapping 101 section, and the workflows are going to be a little bit longer. But I would not recommend that anybody just sit down and just watch all of the workflow videos. I kind of view this course like I view a lot of the books that I choose to read. I would say find something that you're trying to fix. Find a problem that you're trying to solve. So do you want to use mind mapping for taking book notes, or do you want to use mind mapping for recording meeting notes or managing your next project? Well, grab your project that you want to manage this way, have everything in front of you when you sit down and watch that project management workflow video, and then from there you're kind of off and running. To go back to the book example, I've noticed this with a lot of people who just believe that they should read more. Is they buy all these books and they sit on their bookshelf, they never actually read them because somebody said, hey, this book is really good, you should read it sometime. But the people who I know that do read a lot of books, what they do is they read the books that are solving a problem that they are dealing with right now. And that creates the motivation to go through it. So if your goal in getting the course is just to become a mind map master, and to consume all the content on it, that's not the way I would recommend that you do it. I feel like you get a lot more value out of it if you know that you have this one specific, maybe it's a workflow thing that you're trying to solve. So you've got a blog and you're trying to create content for it more regularly, and you have trouble coming up with stuff to publish. In that example, I would say that the workflow video on creating and writing, that would be very beneficial. And then start to build that as a habit. And then from there, you can move on to the next thing when it's time. But just pick something, get that small win, and then apply it to the next thing.
Sound advice. Really sound advice for learning anything. I know you and I have discussed this before, but it's great to sit down and watch anybody's training videos or screencasts or whatever about a program. It's a whole nother one, though, to have a particular project that you want to accomplish, because that kind of forces you to dig in and figure out, okay, these are the features that will benefit me. And if I don't know it, now I got to go look up that feature. To use a very poor example with a mind map, I've got two children here. How do I combine them, or how do I divorce one child from a parent and move it over to another? And those are usually they're very simple technical skills, but if you don't know how to do them, you don't know how to do them. And so having a project really makes a difference to learning the process.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to mind mapping, what you just described about the technical aspects of like moving a node from one location to another, that you can learn pretty quickly. But in that is about 1,000 different ways that you could implement that technical skill, which you won't even see until you kind of understand mind mapping at a high level, though. And then you can understand, like, oh, this is why I might want to move it from one section to the other, or why I might want to make a connection from this node over here to that one over there.
A lot of the folks here that listen and watch MacVoices are going to be familiar with you. They know the style of your writing and your output, and it's always very thoughtful and always very thorough. And so this would be the mind mapping course in my mind to go out there and take if you decide that this is a tool that you want to learn or need to learn. I haven't seen it yet, but I know Mike, and that just sort of says it all. What kind of pricing do we have for this, Mike?
The launch week pricing is going to be, I believe it's $47 for the two different sections. So there's the screencast for MindNode, and then there's everything else. There's the workflows and the Mind Mapping 101 videos. Those are normally $39 a piece as of the last meeting that we had on this. So those combined, almost $80. But with the launch week pricing, with the 20% discount, I believe it is for the first week after it launches, which is the date it goes live is February 11th. So as we record this, it'll be live on Tuesday. And then for the next week, basically, there's a 20% discount. So you can basically get the pro version, which is everything for the cost of one of those sections until February 17th.
Okay. And so folks, make note of that, and I will make note of that in the show notes as best I can, because I know some folks don't always watch or listen to Mac Voices as soon as it comes out. And this one's important because if you want to take advantage of the discount, then you got to do it. And even if you don't, it's still a great value. So one way or another, check the show notes. We'll have a link directly to the course so you can get there. And of course, you can visit the suite setup and see not only this course, but everything else that Mike is doing right now. Because it always seems like, Mike, you're doing a lot.
Well, that's, yeah. It kind of is,
Yeah.
especially lately.
Yeah, that's okay. Keeps you out of trouble,
Right. Yeah, like I said, it's been fun though because I like working with a team. There's a lot of really smart folks over there. Josh Ginter does all of the photography, and he's one of the best photographers I've seen. It's great because we need pictures for something, and hey, Josh, can you take a picture of this? And then he's got 5 different versions of like professional quality photographs for whatever we need. Rosemary Orchard does a lot of like the automation and the quick tips over there. Working with Sean is great. And then having an editor who can go through and look at everything before hitting publish. That's always the part that freaked me out. So it's, like I said, it may be my name on the post, but it's definitely a team effort.
Great. So I think it's appropriate that we let everyone know how they can reach you or where else you are on social media or any other projects at this point, because I know your projects sort of come and go as you complete them and you move on to others. So what's your current set of contact points or projects?
Well, my big projects that are kind of ongoing are the 2 different podcasts that I do. Bookworm, which is bookworm.fm, where Joe Bulig and I read a different personal development business type book every 2 weeks. Hop on the mic and talk about it, hold each other accountable to the action items that we said we were going to apply, that sort of thing. The other one I do is Focused with David Sparks. That's, again, a every other week podcast over on the Relay Network. That's relay.fm/focused. And I guess I should share the URL for the Mind Maps course if people are interested. That is at thesuitesetup.com/mindmaps. And really the only social media I'm on is Twitter. I am at Bobblehead Joe on Twitter. Perfect.
Mike, it's always a pleasure. And thank you so much for letting me know about this course before it comes out. That way we were able to get you on here and get the information out in a timely fashion. And I know that I'm looking forward to seeing you at MacStock this summer.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Thanks for having me.
It always is. It always is. Thanks so much for the time. Thanks for another great course. I expect to learn something from it.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. No kidding. Go and check this out. I got introduced to mind mapping at MacStock, or I should say the benefits of mind mapping at MacStock, and have been using it in some limited fashions. And I think now, with Mike's help, I'll be expanding that use quite a bit. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.